For this video, we are going to be looking at Lesson 11. This one is about understanding historical texts. There are some vocabulary words that you should have already added to your list. If you watch the video, it will help you to do that. And now I can't find them. There we go. You have primary source and secondary source. A primary source is a historical text that was written by someone who witnessed or experienced an event. A secondary source is a historical text written about an event after the event occurred. So if the narrator of the text is a witness to an event, this person is an eyewitness, he or she is a primary source. If they're just telling you about the event and they didn't actually go through it for themselves, then we have a secondary source. So it's important to know the difference between those two. So let's turn over to chapter 11, or I've tabbed my notebook, so I'm going to lesson 11, I guess is a better word. This is page 30 of the textbook. The first example is talking about a strain of flu, and this is at the top of page 30. It's up there with the picture, and I meant to clip the picture and I forgot it. Let me see if I can find that, because I want you to know to never, ever, ever ignore pictures, because sometimes the answer to a question is in the photograph. So let me clip this picture, and I will have to crop it a little bit, but let me bring it back over into this space, and I'll crop it down, or I'll try to. I'm going to have to clip a little bit of the caption, but that's okay. I think I'll just clip the whole caption out. We can still read it. But here is a photo. This actually looks pretty familiar right now. We're in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic, so this picture can hit home here. Okay, let me read the paragraph. I want you to decide if this is a primary source or a secondary source. Near the end of World War I, a terrible strain of the flu broke out. About 50 million people worldwide died in the flu pandemic of 1918. A pandemic is an illness that occurs over a very wide area. It affects a very large number of people. In the spring of 1918, an illness called the 3-day fever appeared. It was really the flu. People recovered quickly. The flu struck again later that fall. People died this time. Some died within hours. And underneath this photo, it says, people wore masks to help prevent the spread of the flu. Does that sound familiar? These folks were wearing their masks just like I have been wearing mine today. Okay, is this a primary source or a secondary source? Does the author of this passage have an eyewitness experience of this event? No, he or she does not. So this is a secondary source. But we need to know why. I need to be able to prove, I need to be able to back up with evidence why I believe this is a secondary source. And one of the ways that I can tell you that is that it's in past tense. It was written about another era of time. This is 2022. This was almost exactly 100 years ago. It was actually a little more than 100 years ago. Again, here is a clue as to when this occurred. Another clue is that we're talking about past tense. Primary sources are often in the present tense because the author's describing what he sees in front of him. But this is a past tense passage. So learn to look at your verbs. You have words like called, appeared, was, recovered, struck, died, and there's died again. So those are past tense. This is putting me in a time in the past that this author did not witness. So this is a secondary source. Okay, the next example at the bottom of the page has a passage and a question. So let's take a look at this one. In the United States, about 25% of people got the flu in 1918. Of those infected, almost 675,000 died. The flu swept across the country from coast to coast. It hit rural areas and cities. Let me just stop here. A rural area is the antonym of a city. Rural means country, out in the country. Cities are urban. So it's telling me that it hit both the country areas and the cities. Many children and older people died of the flu. One of the hardest hit groups was 20 to 40-year-olds. When the flu hit, many young American men were in the Army. They were in huge Army bases, training to fight in World War I. The men lived together in crowded camps. The flu was able to easily spread among the soldiers. Again, is the author of this passage an eyewitness to this event? And he's not. He's talking still about those events of 1918. So this is a secondary source. This passage was written in 2020. I believe this book was published. So this is well after the event that's being described. Okay, here's a question. This is a cause and effect question, and I'm not going to draw the map. We don't need to do that, I think, on this one. You can if you want to. If you just want the practice, it would be the cause-effect map. But here's the question. What caused the flu to affect so many 20 to 40-year-olds? I will point out to you the keywords. You have cause and not effect, but affect. Affect is a verb. Effect is a noun. But both of those signal this type of passage. A, they all lived in rural areas. Is that true? Not at all. It talked about rural areas and cities. So that one is just not true. They made up about 25% of the population. Well, that's not true. The 25% of the population are people who got the flu, not the people in this age range. So we can't say this is true. They lived together in crowded camps. It did mention that. They were taking care of children and older people. That wasn't mentioned at all. So I'm going to go with C. You could even go a step further and ask yourself, why did these people live together in these camps? It was because, and there's another cause-effect word, because people in this age range were training to be soldiers. They were training for the battlefields of World War I. So that's why they lived in the camps, because they lived so closely together and they stayed in close quarters. The flu was able to spread quite easily. Okay, I think I'm going to stop this video just so it won't get so long, and then we'll come back and look at page 31.